Dude, look, our boots are similar. It almost looks
similar.
like,
I thought about that,
like
actually.
Narragate podcast boots.
We need what you're really trying to get to is we need some merch. You've been at that.
We do need some merch.
We need merch for this?
Yeah.
You know,
Colin loves merch.
A Narragate podcast tank. Yeah.
But no, you know, we were selling. The only people that go to our website are moms.
Welcome to the Narragate podcast. I'm Weston.
And I'm Logan.
And this is the Dr. Bradley episode. Dr. Bradley is an incredible man with an incredible life and a lot of experience. And he shared with us just a wealth of information about his history and his experience in the military, from education and pouring into the lives of those that God has entrusted him with. And I think that was a really cool interview.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about just being around him is like you immediately sense God has placed this guy and affirmed him in a season of like, this is where he's supposed to give away this depth of wisdom and knowledge of his life.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to just be around people who want to share their life.
I've known Dr. Bradley for the last 10 years, and he is very intelligent, and he's got a lot of leadership experience, but man, he's got a pastor's heart. He has been with me in some of the deepest, darkest moments that I've experienced in the last 10 years. And I just think that that's helpful to know on the front end that, man, he's got a pastor's heart for sure.
And as always, if you want to hear more about Narrowgate, check out the show notes. Enjoy the episode.
Dr. Bradley, we start off every episode by asking two questions. And I would like for you to answer these two questions. Who are you and why are you here? These two questions are central to who we are at Narragate. And it's always interesting to hear kind of everybody's different take on it.
There's generally two paths, a real practical answer or a very existential answer.
Yeah,
so we leave it to your discretion.
Decide where you want to go with that.
Who am I? Well, as far as background, I just grew up as a country boy in East Texas, small farm town. Married Pam right out of high school, and we'd known each other since second grade. So she married me anyway, and which I thought was a real blessing. Vietnam was going on at the time, and my draft number came out. It was really small, so I was going to get drafted. So I just joined the Air Force, beat them to the punch, and then after a short time, they handed me an ROTC scholarship, said, we're letting you out now, go to college and come back in as an officer. And I said, okay, good deal. I'll do that. I didn't mind the Air Force. It was just keeping me out of college. It was slowing me down, so that was the best of both worlds. So did 29 years doing that, traveling all over the world, doing some really fascinating things, and retired in 2004. But I got saved shortly after getting back in as an officer. I was a second lieutenant, and very quickly got a very clear call to full-time ministry and education. I mean, it's just crystal clear. It's really a cool story as to how God pulled it off. So I thought, okay, finish my 4 years, get out, go to seminary. He goes, and I wasn't running from my call at all. I would have gotten out any time. But he just made it very clear in certain circumstances and things that he wanted me to do a career in the military. So I thought, okay. And I didn't understand why. There were a lot of mornings when I was shaving in the mirror going, when are you going to let me answer this call? I can't stand it. I'm tired of waiting. I was so eager to do it. So naturally, during that time, I was building my library, reading books, doing everything in church I possibly could. I was wanting to get in as much as possible. I always said I was a 20-20 man because you could do 20 years in the military and retire at half your base pay for the rest of your life. It's changed now, but that was the system during the Cold War. So I always said I was a 20-20 man, 20 years and 20 seconds, and I am getting out and I am going.
Sure.
That's funny.
But about the time, there were so many things in my military career that I either did wrong or I really did something that usually doesn't enhance your career, standing up for the right thing and taking your lumps and that kind of thing.
Is that your polite way of saying you bucked the system often?
I did occasionally.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
It's good.
That's the technical terminology.
That was very like, that was well said.
I had gone through enough and seen God confirm things in my career, times when people really came after me. I mean, seriously came after me, trying to ruin my career because I wasn't ashamed of the gospel. I wasn't brash and running around, with a 5-pound cross around my neck, but I wasn't hesitant to bring it up if it was appropriate and that kind of thing. And I saw the Lord protecting me, career-wise, and then there was times when I, what we call, spoke truth to power.
I'm assuming that has a little more weight to it, maybe in the military than other places.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't always the right time either. When I was a squadron commander, I was going up for full colonel, and only 2% of the Air Force officers make full colonel. I mean, that's considered a senior officer. Colonels and generals are senior officers in the military. So things were going really well, and let me just say, my group commander, who was a full colonel, I was a lieutenant colonel, and he was my boss, and I got crossways in his office where we were on both sides, standing on both sides of the coffee table with our arms folded, neither refusing to give in.
Just imagine this like Western movie, and there's like a tumbleweed rolling through the middle, and like,
well, it was West Texas. So. Yeah, surprised it wasn't. In San Angelo.
Oh,
don't be disappointed.
Colin and I are both from Abilene, Texas, Dyess Air Force Base.
Yeah.
Of course, we grew up.
This was Goodfellow.
Weapons of war just flying over our head, thinking that was normal until we moved to a different town. Like, oh, not everybody has an Air Force base.
Yeah,
Not
everybody
has the B-1 bombers flying over. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I didn't realize it, but in the midst of that, speaking truth to power, he said something, and I rolled my eyes. And he said, "That's it, Bradley, out of my office." And he threw me out of his office. That was 30 days before he sat down and wrote my promotion recommendation form as to whether he thought I should get promoted or not.
Wow.
And I went back to my DO, my ops officer, who was the number 2 guy in the squadron, and I said, "I think I just got fired. You need to prepare to take command." But he was an officer of character, and he recognized I caught him doing something wrong, and I called him on it. I didn't roll with it, and he took offense to that. He was a good guy. I mean, we were all under a lot of stress. So I ended up getting promoted. So yeah, I've had times like that. But it goes back to something that I've learned over the years in the secular world, if I can say that the real question in tough times and scary times is not how do I get out of this or what should I do, in my own power and my own wisdom. I learned that it really boils down to what will God bless. Whether it's trying to really razzle-dazzle something and look better than you really were, or, you hide facts, you blame it on something, all of these things. It's really what will God bless, and doing things that glorify Him, being a godly example, admitting that I was wrong, and I'll take the lumps and I'll correct it. I'm not going to have anybody else correct it. I'll correct it. I'm not going to put that on somebody else when it was my fault. Things like that. And God did that. I was very comfortable talking with people about my faith, which caused some problems. But I learned that any bad thing that comes my way, God allows it. Because I'm untouchable unless he allows me to be touched. So why duke it out? Why, lie, cheat, and steal to protect your career, your reputation, things like that? And, I just did the right thing, even though it might sting. And I just saw him over and over blessing that. So that was kind of the gist of my military career. And then I guess what I was trying to get to was 20,
In 20
2020.
seconds.
Yeah.
But when I was at 19, Pam and I talked about, okay, are we wanting to retire? Well, I saw my career really going well, and God was doing it. Trust me. And I said, let's just let it ride. So I went about 8.5 more years, and it was a wonderful assignment, wonderful time. And then the Lord made it clear, okay, now. At that time, I finished my doctorate, so I was ready to be hired. I didn't want to retire and then spend several years finishing my education. Then I wanted to go right in. So that was my goal. If I'm going to stay in, then I'm going to do all this while I'm in. And
so you were going to school while still in the military?
Yeah. And even that was an amazing story. That was quite a blessing. That another time. So then in 2004, I was a professor, but there were still lessons to learn and maturing lessons, as well as some military things that he still hadn't chiseled off of me that needed to be taken care of. And then after that, it started getting really good. My son graduated from Dallas Seminary, got called by a church in Nashville. So he had the audacity to take my only grandkids with him. Never forgive him for that. So I'll teach you. I'll move up there.
Sure.
So we've been here about 10 years, which is the longest we've ever lived in one place.
Wow.
And ELI. I've learned too, especially at this level, that I quit trying to figure things out. I just do what God puts in front of me.
I'm curious how there's obviously some history, between you guys. How did you come to know about Narrowgate?
Well, Weston was one of my students, and matter of fact, one of my first students.
Favorite
here.
This guy.
Favorite students.
First.
That's what he meant.
First, not favorite. I tried to get him to get his hearing checked, but he never heard me.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Same luck with you trying to get me to get my hair cut. Still didn't work.
Yeah, it was pure jealousy. So that's where we met. And he really stood out in class as being a sharp student. And what I immediately recognized is class wasn't enough. I wanted more. Good questions and everything. And he came up after the first class, I think, and said, can we meet each week and do more of this? I said, oh yeah. My tail was wagging here and there. So, how many years did we do that?
Gosh, 6, 7,
yeah,
something like that.
I was thinking like 6 or something. So
yeah, every Thursday morning. It was hermeneutics.
Which is one of the things I'm teaching out here now.
Yeah.
Yeah, everywhere I went, another surprise. I never thought of this, but my doctorate was in missions, so I thought, okay, I'll be a missions professor. And then every school I went to teach, they said, with your military background, would you teach our leadership classes too? So it kind of became, at Dallas Seminary, I was with them for 10 years. I was actually teaching in 2 departments, in leadership department and missions department, which made total sense. And again, I look back on the Lord going, no, you just stay, do what you do. And, then I understood why. So I teach the guys out here that good leaders are always in self-assessment mode. When I told everybody that, was it clear? Did they receive it well? Do I need to do this or that? You're just always checking, am I doing things the way it needs to be done, instead of just assuming that. So when you get with a lot of time behind you, you learn to watch what God has done, how he's protected you when you really were out of line, how he ensured that you did an honorable thing, which is him doing it in us, the impact that it had on other people, the bad things that come in your life and you carry them well because you're trusting in the Lord. Nothing happens in your life that he doesn't bring it about. And if he does, and he loves you without question, it's for a purpose.
Yeah.
And that's a good purpose. So you wear it well, and then people will come and ask you, how can you be so calm? How can you not be furious after what they did? That kind of thing. And the more, it's beautiful, because the more I would do that at the, illumination of the Lord, it wasn't that I was that spiritual or smart. The more I saw that happening, the more peaceful I was with things happening. I knew the Lord had it. And my first question each time became, okay, what's God's purpose in this? Because I want to line up with that purpose. And there's my decision making. So if you understand God working that way in your life, and he does, then when things happen, what do? Doesn't enter your mind. One, you stay faithful to what he's called you to do. You live the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, etc. And you let God do it. And expect things to happen. When you can't witness to anybody in the military, especially down the chain of command, so.
And is that by design, by structure?
And that is a good policy, because, your career is rather fragile. And it's against the law, actually, because you don't want people thinking that they've got to pray that prayer or go to church with you or whatever, because they're afraid if they don't, I'll ruin their career. So you can't do that.
Yeah.
And I totally support that policy. So what I did is I just showed my people naturally, and I didn't overdo it, that I'm very comfortable talking about my faith. And as the Lord moves, then there's people knocking on my door going, hey, sir, do you have a question? Or do you have a minute? I said, sure.
Yeah.
Come in, close the door. And then once they start talking about it, I can say anything.
Yeah. I think I remember you telling me once, it was sort of like incognito ways of revealing that you're comfortable with your faith, like around a water cooler or something, just saying, yeah, somebody says something, you're like, that's funny. My pastor this Sunday was saying this, and that just really resonated. And it's not this overt, hey, I'm a Christian and God says, and this is what the Bible says. It's like, you're just letting people in to know that, you do have faith in God, and it's not pushed on them, but that opens the door for them to do like what you just said, come knock on your door.
Yeah. And in my early Christian life, it was pretty aggressive. You're challenging people and you're starting the conversation, stuff like that. And whereas with this, if you're just not ashamed of the gospel, and you respect people and how you relate to them, then as God moves in their heart, they come to you instead of me, chasing people down in the hallway kind of thing. So, then you're a lot more comfortable that the Lord is doing this.
That's good. I want to tag on something to earlier, how he learned about Narrowgate.
Yeah.
So he and I started meeting when I was going to Williamson College back in 2014 or 13 or whatever it was. And so we were meeting for several years. And so at that time, I wasn't on staff here at Narragate. I had graduated Narragate, but I wasn't on staff. I was actually running a handyman company, is a way of glorifying that statement. I'd fix things at people's houses and they paid me for it. But I had some people that would work for me, and I was also very plugged in at my church. I was on the staff there as the discipleship pastor, and so what initiated our relationship was just like obviously he was very intelligent and knew a lot about the Word and knew about not just like he didn't just sit there and teach Bible studies. He taught how to study the Bible. And I was just so enthralled with that. And so what started as we're just going to get together and talk about the scriptures, talk about, God and how to study and different things. It became, also some leadership stuff. Cause like you said, the military experience that just sort of infiltrated all of the times that we were meeting. And I found it very helpful and practical in my own leadership development because I was leading at the church and leading in a company. And then I transitioned from that role at the church and the company to here. That's whenever I got the invite. So he helped me through that transition, and then has continued to be a voice in my own life here as I develop as a leader here. And so it's really cool to look back and think, I was just a dude that came up to you like on our bathroom break at class. It was like, hey, can we hang out?
Well, me getting to Williamson College was the same way. I came up here, and because of the schools that are here are super liberal, I'm going, okay, I'm called to education. This is a desert. I don't know what I'm going to do here. And then I heard about Williamson College, so I took my resume up there and sat down and said, hey, can I teach a class here? And the president looked at my resume and he said, how about Vice President of Academic Affairs?
Yeah. Well, I remember that. They introduced you like on your first day as like the missions professor or something like that. And then literally like the next week you came in and they were like, this is the dean, and I was like, whoa, that was a quick jump. Like, golly. Yeah. So you're obviously, impressed somebody,
Again, it's just, this is one of the blessings of being as old as I am.
Was it like 95, 99 now?
My elbows feel like it. Yeah.
You guys,
my hands and my wrists feel like it. But seriously, you get so much mileage that you've got a lot to look back on, and it's a little more calm at this point, because you're not in the fight anymore, and you can just see how active God has been in your life and how His timing.
Yeah.
He brings things in front of you that you've been wanting to do for a while, and it just you weren't able to make it work out. It's just like me, man. I'm self-taught in Hebrew, and I just can't. I probably read the Old Testament too much, and I kept trying to get into doctoral programs, and it just wasn't working. Either I wasn't anywhere close to a campus or, all of that stuff. But he kept giving me, I had a pretty unusual career even for an Air Force intelligence officer. I did some unique stuff. I was a senior military liaison to German intelligence for a while, living near Munich and civilian clothes and German license plates and going to German locations and stuff like that. Just super cross-cultural.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he made it clear that he pointed me to Western Seminary in Portland, doctor in missiology, missions. And I'm going, okay, that's it. Now I get it. So again, you with a lot of mileage, you've got more to look back on and see where God was leading you through these hard spots, through these turns and long spells and things like that. And you look back and I wouldn't change a thing.
Is there any specific kind of hard thing? Again, I have almost zero frame of reference for a career in the military, but I'm wondering if there's any one or two things that come to mind that seemed really hard at the time that God has made really evident that like this is a tool that I gave you in that hard season that you're pulling out a lot these days again for the benefit of other young men or other people you're giving leadership qualities to. Is there anything comes to mind?
Yeah, well, 20 or 30 things.
I mean, we got time.
Yeah.
Well, you can always edit. Yeah, there were a lot of it was persecution, especially early on. When you get more senior, you don't hear so much about that. And you get it to levels where other officers typically don't mess with that kind of stuff. But early on, it was pretty hard. It was pretty hard, and some of it I handled well, and some of it I didn't. But it was all part of learning. Here's one story, and I'll keep it as short as I can. In the military, they don't let solicitors come and badger you all year about giving to this and giving to that. So they say, okay, we're going to have a combined federal campaign. This is a great God story. This is my favorite God story.
I know.
Yeah, I don't know it. I'm ready to hear it.
Literally, I mean, I've asked this guy every question you can think of. I've heard all the stories, and so
we got to come in fresh, man. The people need to hear.
Well, look, I can't. I've got to have integrity. I'm not just going to pretend I don't know the man.
That's good.
Well, I'm feeling a little ambushed here. I didn't know this was going to be a comedy podcast. So
I keep things light. That's why I'm here.
I'll keep looking at you.
Yeah. Okay.
So they have a thing called Combined Federal Campaign. And one time a year, these organizations can, expect to get some donations from Air Force guys. And there's a long list of accepted organizations, validated organizations. So they give you the brochure. They give you a thing to fill out if you want to give and how much and how and all of that stuff. And you check which one you want the money to go to. Well, in typical DOD fashion, they have goals that you've got to meet, as if you're in control of how much people are going to give. And they will pick a captain on the base to be in charge of it because that's a really good leadership thing that they can put in your performance report. One year they had this captain doing that. And a lot of people really kind of resented it. Because if they want to give, they'll give, and why are we doing that kind of thing? So it wasn't necessarily a popular thing. So this was a very political base, a lot of military politics at this base because there were a lot of generals there. And the collection was over, and it was way short of the goal of giving. And that poor captain got called into the colonel's office who worked for the general. So he didn't want to go into the general with the bad news. So he ripped the skin off this captain and told him that he was throwing it all away and you're going to go back and you're going to do it all over, Captain. And they got much less contributions the second time. The workforce kind of said, we'll teach you not to do that.
So the whole campaign for giving and making donations, it's over, and the captain has to go back and do the whole campaign again, asking the same people for money?
Yep. And it's not so much asking them, but giving them the paperwork to where everybody has an opportunity to.
Sure.
There's no rah, it's, if you give it, if you want to. Everybody has a chance to give. That's the way they do it. So next year, Captain Bradley was selected, and I'm going, okay. So I knew all the history of that. I got all of the workers together because every division, every department, every squadron had a guy that did it in their squadron, and it all came back to me, So I got them all together, introduced myself, and I said, we all know what happened last year. I'm telling you, I want you to make sure everybody's been notified and they've got the paperwork and they give what they want to give. You give all of that to me, and no money exchanged, but just
Sure.
The information.
pledges,
Yeah.
and everything, that all of the paperwork comes back to me. And if we don't meet our goal, that's not your problem. That's my problem. All right. So I don't care if we don't get any money. I don't care. We're going to do our job, which is to make sure everybody's notified, answer any questions, and it goes where it goes. And I mean, this sounds like a war story, but I've got it in my performance report. You know what we did with the goal? We doubled it. Exactly 200% of the goal. And that was the first time, because I was still saved like 6 years or so. That was the first time that I really saw how God can really take care of you and cover for you and all of that stuff in your life. He's the one that's in charge of all that. It's not my hard work and craftiness and tricks and, all of that stuff that makes this stuff happen. He does. Because that is all I did. And I'm telling you, I never broke a sweat over it. I wasn't worried about it. I wasn't scared. And that's what God did. And that's when, it kind of snapped my head back going, whoa, okay, I'm starting to get it.
And
so
you essentially, when you told everyone like, hey, even if we don't meet our goal, we're not going to do a repeat of last year. So you were prepared, at least, mentally, to walk into the colonel's office and him say, do it again. And you were going to say no, right? I mean, like, at least you were aware that could be an outcome.
Yeah. And we would talk about it. Unfortunately, I didn't have to cross that line.
Yeah.
But I doubt serious. I don't know. I mean, what I would have done.
Sure.
But the point is,
I'm trying to make you look awesome,
Lord,
man. Like you're a warrior, yeah.
Yeah.
William Wallace.
But
on
God
the front
is
lines.
the point of that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
200%. I mean, we didn't exceed the goal. He doubled the goal.
Yeah.
And all we did was hand out paperwork. That was it. And I took the pressure off of them. I led, this is on me. Don't worry about it. None of it's going to roll back on you. And we'll just see what happens.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So, first it's going to have some pre-qualifier context. So Dr. Bradley has been coming out and working with the students in the service phase for the last year or so more.
Mm-hmm.
And he's doing a leadership course, which is like 4 weeks, once a week, I believe on Mondays.
Half a day each time.
Half a day in the mornings, they do a leadership kind of 101 course. And then in the afternoons, a hermeneutics course. So it's really cool. He comes out, every week. And they all love it, and sometimes staff gets to sit in and they love it. And it's always like, even I sit in sometimes. Actually, I just come in and like mess with you, and then you mess with me back and make me look bad. And then I walk out. And so
call it a day.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's the way it's supposed to be. But I'm interested.
He sounds tough when there's witnesses.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. I walk in, I'm like, what's up, old man? And he's like, shut up. You lose this fight every time. But I'm curious, because I don't think I've ever asked you this directly, like in your experience with the Narrowgate students, because you've gone through, 6 or 7 or 8 different classes of guys that have come through. Mm-hmm. What's the thing that keeps you coming back?
Well, 2 things really. And again, going back to my age, is when you see how much God has done in your life, and you're still healthy enough to keep going. You've got so much to die with. Okay, I don't want to die with it. I want to dump it all. So you start getting into a phase to where you're wanting to pour it back into the guys coming up behind you as hard as you can. Because a lot of these things, especially leadership, I learned through experience. You would think that you'd be taught a lot of leadership in the military. You're really not. You're given these responsibilities and good luck. If you are lucky enough to really be working for a good officer, then, a lot of it will rub off. You got a guy that you can come in and close the door and say, hey, listen, help me with this. I don't, you know, I had, well, so a lot of this is from experience, and a lot of it, I think what I enjoy the most is talking about my mistakes, you know, but also how I use those mistakes and the things I did better later in my career. So a lot of it is anecdotal. You know, this went on, and this was the situation, and this is how I handled it, and this is why, and this is how I would have done it if I did it again. Even though it went well, I would have probably done it a little bit differently, you know. And I'm drawing principles out of that. Just like I said earlier, a good leader is always in self-assessment mode. What are the traits of good leaders? All of that is what I've observed in good leaders, what I have learned sometimes the hard way. My dad was a good leader. He the World War II veteran in the Navy, came back and immediately got into the Army Reserves and did 20 years there and retired in the Army Reserves. And he taught me a lot of leadership principles. And one of it, well, the biggest thing he taught me is you stand up for your people. You protect your people. What is that? That's shepherding.
Yeah.
And Dad didn't go to church, you know, but it's the same principle, you know. So I bit down on that pretty early. But why? Why stand up for your people? And the big one, how do you stand up for your people? You know, so just all of the things, I just really love it primarily because these guys are hungry, you know, and they need it. They need somebody to say, okay, look, this is what this is about. This is how you do it. But one of the 4 days is leading through conflict.
That's huge. I think we all need a dose of that.
Another of the 4 days, complete day is leading through change. One of the most dangerous things you'll do as a leader. So how do you do that? What kind of people are you going to be having to wrestle with? How do you speak truth to power? I left the class the other day because we're going to do change the next time we're together. And I drew the front half of a bell curve. And I said, okay, you just got hired as the new pastor of this church. The church is starting to take off. When do you start planning for change? And I just let that hang in the air. And I said, think about it. Talk among yourselves if you want, and we'll address it next time. You know, so it is really fulfilling and a real blessing to not only have an opportunity to pour into the guys coming behind you and give them a leg up instead of having to learn all this themselves, if they ever do. In the military, it's like 3 lifetimes, you know, because everybody's always moving. Every summer you lose a third of your people and you get a third new people you've never seen before. And then you're leaving. And, you know, you do that. I did that for almost 30 years. So how many people have I met? How many kinds of people working for me? Good guys, bad guys. I was working for them. You know, all of that stuff. You just pick up a lot. And I've committed the rest of my life to pouring that into the generations coming up behind me to where they can do better earlier. And that's what I'm all about.
So cool. I think one of the most the things that one of the best things about your leadership, teaching, and interactions with guys that are learning from you are you have a story or a real life experience that goes with all of these principles that you're talking about. And they're really easy to relate to. And they're really easy to like see, you know, and understand. It's like, oh, okay, that's not just a principle that you read in a leadership book. Like I can see how that would apply in my own life. And for me, like I can think of 5 stories off the top of my head that you've told me that I've the story was the thing that like embedded it in me. You know, it wasn't just a quick, you know, quote or a leadership principle that you would highlight in a book. It was like, no, this is what that looks like. And then I can think of several stories where I've experienced that in my own life, and it just builds on itself. So I've always appreciated that about your teachings and interactions and all that.
And a lot of times when I'll do that, I'll take them halfway through the story and then I'll stop and say, what would you do?
Yeah.
What would you do from here? This is you. What would you do now? And of course they don't know. And I know that. And I'm not trying to humiliate them or look smart or anything, but I want them to process that, because if I don't teach them this, they're going to have that stunned mullet look in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're a leader and they look like that in front of their guys, that's going to be hard to recover from.
Yeah.
So I want them to be confronted with it now. And I let it hang. What would you do? Yeah, I don't know. No, wrong answer. What would you do?
Yeah, it's not the best time to experience
and then
that
just
for the first time is in the moment.
And then just go quiet. Tell me. And then once I've made that point and they've struggled a little bit and maybe given me an answer or something, then we talk about the answer or refine the answer. Or, I try to create the simulated stories of their own. Lots of times these guys will say, man, that is just like my boss before I came to Narrowgate. Had that happen the other day. And the psychology of leadership is fascinating to me. How people lead, why they lead, why they do it the way they do it. And so much of that is who they really are. And that's what I lead off with in the leadership classes. I talk about how important it is. But I say that the most important thing is when you're leading, we find out who you really are.
Yeah.
And you find out who you really are.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be in situations to where, buddy, you better compromise. Buddy, you better put that in the drawer and not let anybody see it. But is that what you should do? And we go back to what will God bless?
That's good.
So yeah, it's the stories that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly point something out, because this is more almost a question for you.
This
isn't the first time that you've mentioned, just how you guys met and asking him, hey, would you like to hang out and meet one-on-one? I just want to confess, I was in my 20s, in my early 30s, for crying out loud. I felt almost slighted by the world, or had a complaint that, like, man, I don't have any older, wiser men, spending one-on-one time with me. I was kind of pointing the finger at the whole world. And at the same time, I didn't have the courage to seek it out. And I was just realizing this isn't the first time that you've mentioned, hey, like, I saw something in someone that I wanted and I approached them, and then all of a sudden there's this discipleship relationship that's happening. So there's obviously a couple pieces to this. You being God perfectly priming you in a position where your heart is just, man, I got to give it away. But for you to have the boldness to be like, I see that,
that's right,
I want that, and I'm going to have the courage to go ask that. I'm just realizing, man, that was something I was missing, and I don't know. Is this an opportunity for you to encourage graduates or other guys listening? Man, like, when you see it, don't be afraid to go ask for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if anything, an encouragement to whoever's listening, don't do what I did and just complain that I don't have it. Man, take that step in faith and try to build those relationships with men who clearly have a depth of wisdom that we all need. So,
well, I will gladly take your encouragement to share my wealth of wisdom. Just kidding. No, I think I went through Narrowgate and I was introduced to a whole new life. A whole new me, the real me. And I was in this sort of spiritual bubble where every day I'm being discipled, Bill's here, Boots, Daniel Jenkins, Ty Homer, Travis Armstrong, all these guys that I looked up to. I had direct access to them daily, and the change that I experienced from day one of Narrowgate to, graduation day was so deep that I knew that was because of the people who had poured into me. And when I graduated and left the bubble, I realized that the world doesn't just provide you with that automatically, and I realized pretty quickly that I was trying to like reach back into Narrowgate, and like I would like send Bill emails or like, try to go out for Bible studies and stuff like that. But it was just so, I was no longer in the program. And now as the director of Narrowgate Lodge, I realize how difficult it is to extend your reach outside of the lodge because there's so much to pour into here. And so I realized that that was the season, when I was at Narrowgate, I had access to those people specifically during that season, but I wasn't done like growing. Like I didn't have this, like I was still hungry for growth, and I knew that I was capable of more. And so I think that when I entered Narrowgate, I had this like sort of pride about who I was. And then whenever I left, I had this real acknowledgement that like, oh, I actually don't know what I'm doing, And so I knew that I wanted to continue to grow, and that wasn't just going to happen to me. I wasn't going to get it from reading books and like, just praying and writing stuff in my journal. And, I needed more. And so I wanted that discipleship, again. And so, it was kind of, whenever I met him for the first time, I had been through a couple of classes at Williamson College, and they were great, great teachers, great classes. But coming out of Narrowgate, I felt like I knew a lot of it already, not to say that I knew everything, but it felt all kind of very familiar. And so then first day he started teaching, it was like, he was using the whiteboard. He was handing out, printouts of old ancient manuscripts and showing you how to like identify the errors and different, translations and things like that. And then, kind of bringing this, just this insight into the word that felt like similar to Narrowgate, And so immediately I was like, that's what I've been looking for. That's what I've been needing. And so, it almost like looking back, it's kind of silly, but literally I just walked up and said, hey man, can we hang out like on a regular basis, cause I didn't know how to say, hey man, will you disciple me, So it was just that. And like, I'm hoping that he's not like, well, sorry, son, I'm pretty busy. I am a professor, and, I've got important things going on in my life. But I remember exactly what you said. You looked at me and like, I'm on the edge of my seat, right? I just said, hey, can we hang out on a regular basis and me learn from you like forever, And he looked at me just for a moment. There was like a moment of like brief, like a pause. And I was like, what is he going to say? And he said, oh yeah, I'm all over that. Why don't you meet me at my house on Thursday morning? And I was like, yes. And then that lasted for a long time. We're still talking, I still come to you for advice and still, bounce things off of you because I haven't learned all that you know and have experienced yet. And, so to your point earlier, you want to pour your life into the next generation. You don't want to die with it. Like, man, you have passed a lot of it on, and your life has impacted at least one person like really deeply. It's me. Yeah. Just in case,
Well, another early point I make in the leadership classes is leadership is influence. It's not power.
Oh yeah.
If you lead by power, you're a failed leader.
Yeah.
It's about influence. So the question is, how do you influence people to where they will respect you and want to work for you through thick and thin? Mm-hmm. Not just when it's good, but when the storms come and you really mess up, they're going to stay with you. That's influence. And really, teaching is leadership. You're wanting to lead the people that you're teaching to the right place in their lives. You want to help them get there, and you want them to understand why they're there and how they got there. And now what are they going to do? Now what kind of things are ahead of them? How do you handle it when we talked was it yesterday? 2 days ago. I forget the last time I was out here, but it was just a day or two ago. Anyway, how I believe all organizational charts are upside down. And when I have PowerPoints, which I don't use them out here, and I cover this, I'll say, okay, I want you to watch this this PowerPoint slide, and I'll click. I just let it flash up there, and I say, what did you see? Well, they said, well, it was an org chart. The president was at the top. The vice presidents it was like 4 or 5 underneath, and it goes quiet. And I said, that was not even a quarter of what was on there. What else was on there? Crickets. And I said, this is the problem. Because psychologically, people, when they see charts, they go top center. They're thinking up the chain of command. And I think it's upside down. And I do a combat map. Okay, so when we're in combat, at the top of the map is the enemy. And you got the forward edge of the battle area, which is the battle line. And then who do you have right across the line in front of the enemy? Privates, lieutenants. You got the bottom end of the organization. And then what's the next one? Well, the next leadership up. You got the captains and the company commanders and all that stuff. And then the next echelon, moving further and further down the map, you get more and more senior, the brigades, the battalions, brigades, divisions, and you start getting into the generals and everything. Now, what's the difference? The generals aren't the one accomplishing the mission. The soldiers are the ones that are accomplishing the mission. And every echelon behind them down the map is focused on the fight, not focused on the general. They're focused on the fight. Do they need more ammo? They need artillery support. Okay, let's have a fire mission that puts artillery rounds on this spot of the enemy and everything. And if you got a unit that's all shot up or they've been fighting for 28 hours, you get the reserves, you pull them offline, put a fresh unit in, pull them back, feed them, rest them, shower them, let them, kind of unwind and everything and get ready to fight again. Okay. Everything from the general down is focused on the mission accomplishment. If your mind is an org chart, like we use them, your thoughts are going up the chain of command. How do I make my boss happy? Okay, how do I get his job when he leaves? And many times the people that were actually accomplishing the mission aren't even on the org chart. Okay, do away with them and see how well you do. But everybody is focused up the chain of command. Whereas if you look at a combat map, which is the way I think org charts ought to be, you've got the people accomplishing the mission at the top. And my first question of the echelon just below them is, what are you doing to support the fight? What are you doing to support the people that are accomplishing our mission? And that's where I want you thinking. So leadership is about influence. It's about making smart change, and that kind of thing. And I think once they get that in their head, then even if they're in an organization that doesn't see it that way, they're going to shine.
Yeah.
Because they're going to see it that way. And it kind of falls into a bigger principle that I learned many years ago, that you are who you are based on the books you've read, the places you've traveled, and the people you've met. Now think about that. What has influenced you in your life? You've read a book, or in our culture, you saw a movie that just really blew you away, and you go, man, I want to get in the Marine Corps. Man, I want to, I want to do this. You're really influenced by it. Or you've been someplace, and I really identify with this because I've been a lot of places. And you talk to the people and you see how they do things, and you go, that's interesting. You find out why they do it that way, and wow, that's a very good reason. I like that. I worked a lot with the Brits, and we'd get into World War II conversations. And, we were the young whippersnappers. We wanted to go over and jump straight into France. And the Brits are already getting chewed up and have a little more experience at this than we do. And Churchill convinced Roosevelt to put us in North Africa. Let us kind of figure this out, how you do this. And I didn't really know that until a Brit told me, so I'm listening to the Brits talk about their views of early World War II. And I'm going, I think you're right. I think you guys had it figured out. We didn't, so you just learn, even if it's not changing your mind, but just you're aware. People talk about Muslims now. I got tons of time with Muslims, in my military time and, my ministry time. And I listen to most people, and I can tell they don't know the first thing about Muslims, because they haven't met any, they haven't studied it at all. They haven't traveled to any Muslim countries. They haven't lived in any Muslim countries, but yet they've got a real hard opinion. So if they did those things, it would really shape them, So it's the books you've read, the places you've traveled, the people you've met.
I can think of 5 men in my life that have shaped who I am today. Not counting Jesus. He would be, well, I guess he's in all 5 of those.
Well, I get what you're saying. It's those people you look at and you're like, with Paul says it, imitate me as I imitate Christ. But I've had that genuine reaction to somebody like, man, I typically, because I'm kind of goofy, I attach comedy to it when I don't need to. But I'll be like, I'll say, even as a grown up, I'll be like, I want to be like that guy when I grow up.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, no, I know that kind of response.
Well, I can look at the different aspects of my character, my passions, my the things that make me who I am. And I can tie each one of them to a person that I've learned from. And I don't know that I've stopped to think about it until you were just talking, like the people that I've met, the things that I've learned from them. Right. And wow, it's pretty incredible. Like nobody is developed in a vacuum. Everybody is who they are. As a product of the people they've met, the places they've been or grew up, or the things they've learned through, whether it's books or podcasts or, documentaries, movies, TV shows, things like that. Pretty cool.
Well, you even see it growing up, the 9th graders want to be like the 10th graders.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And it's really a big deal. I mean, I grew up in a small town. So, if one of the older kids wants you to hang out with them, it's like, whoa, man, I'm somebody, and of course you'll do whatever they tell you to do. And however they do it, you do it. It's kind of natural, which makes parenting important.
Yeah.
Because you need to steer that a little bit.
Yeah.
As to who's influencing your kids. But especially the travel, I think that's where Americans fall the shortest. If we travel, it's to Mexico or Cancun or, Bahamas or something like that. But to really get into, further travel or, engaging people here. When I was at A&M, I met a guy, that's where I went to college. I met a Turk who was one of the students. And, I knew a little bit about Turkey, but not much. And we got to talking and everything. And he gave me a constitution, a Turkish constitution. And he said, it's very much, and this is way out of date because they've thrown that thing away a long time ago. But he said, much of what's in our constitution came out of your constitution. I said, really? Like what? Well, what he told me were the significant things. See, so just asking that question, I found out, the significant things in their constitution that they got out of ours That's important to understand. In my doctoral program, it was just an amazing missions faculty at Western, and they kept saying, first you must understand. I mean, that was the starting statement for everything. First, you must understand. If you think you're going to go be a missionary in Kenya, then you don't get off the plane and start a church. First, you must understand. Understand what? Everything. Now, it doesn't mean you have to know everything before you do anything, but you're a student. Okay, how do they do things here? Why do they do that thing? What are the things you better not ever do? Like in Muslim countries, you don't walk up and shake a man's wife's hand. No. Just do's and don'ts that if you do that ignorantly, then you may even have to pack up and go someplace else because you're ruined.
You're
never going to be effective.
Do you find that's just cultural norms, or is it deeper than that? Like you really kind of have to have a window of their worldview before you.
Well, that's part of culture.
Even tiptoe in with
that's part of culture.
Sure.
And in the curriculum that we had, everything was culture. The courses we took, it was intercultural communications, intercultural leadership, intercultural education, intercultural church planning, how to, intercultural, cultural analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So you get there, okay, how do you understand the culture? How do you even go about it? Well, there's ways to do that, but you just don't jump right in doing ministry. First, you must understand, who are these people? How do they see Americans? The do's and don'ts. They teach you to have I forgot the word now. It's been so long. But what was the word now? Anyway, it's been a long time since I thought about that. It's basically a person in that culture. So like when I was in Turkey, a Turk, who you could go to, and he wanted you to understand his culture. So you had a safe person to go to say, hey, look, my wife and I were in the open market buying fruits and vegetables the other day, and Pam used the English word. She said, could I have a bag of those peaches? And the whole market started horse laughing at her. And the guy with the market, came over. No. The name of that is. And so I had a Turkish lieutenant working for me. So the next day I said, Kamal, what happened? I told him the story. And he started laughing. And he said, that word peaches is a very ugly word in Turkish.
Don't say peaches in Turkey.
Yeah.
Don't say peaches in Turkey.
And Pam asked for a bag of them.
Those kinds of things. So first you must understand. And that is true of a new job.
Mm-hmm.
That's true of a new neighborhood.
I'm a little late to the take on this, but I was just reminded, is in the Arab world, you don't show the bottom of your feet, or in quite a few cultures, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Like even sitting as we are now, like showing the bottom of your feet towards a person is extremely disrespectful. Right. And again, we wouldn't think of that. And yet all of a sudden we've built a wall of disrespect in between the people we're trying to reach, for the kingdom. And so, you're dead on there.
Well, the thing I love about that is that it's we're not just talking about cultures as far as like different parts of the world. Like that's applicable to individual relationships, like you need to understand, you need to have, like what you said, just a glimpse at an understanding of their, view of the world and life. And I remember a quote, probably Maxwell or something. He said that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. and you can't care if you're not interested in what their experience in this life is, and that's part of the reason why Narrowgate works so well, is because it is so relational in nature, and the guys are here, they're residential, they're living here. We're doing life together.
Right.
And we had the time to build the relationship and know the histories. And, like if a guy comes and his parents are divorced, or maybe he lost a parent, and like we find that information out quickly, because nothing shoots influence in the head like being around somebody for months at a time and then bringing up, how's your parents? You know what I mean? And you're just like, you don't know me at all. One of the most significant moments in my life, you clearly are, completely, you don't have a clue. And so that's really cool to think about. First, you must understand, like, in order to have influence, in order to have leadership in somebody's life, you've got to put yourself in their life.
Well, Dr. Bradley, we want to thank you for being here officially, man, just spending time to just chat with us again.
Yeah, it's my blessing.
It truly is a blessing to sit with someone who is eager to give away the wisdom that God's collected within them. So thank you for that. But yeah, man, to think about, I feel a little bit jealous in the fact that, you've been a part of the Narrowgate family for a short time, and I'm just thinking about myself and a bunch of other graduates who may be listening who've never had the chance to meet you before. And so, man, if there was just one word of encouragement, that you could give to young men in seasons of transition or new in the faith, or graduates who are kind of finding themselves in the world, what would you leave us with today?
Commit yourself to being a lifelong learner, because there's going to be a lot of educational things that you need to learn. You need to be a lifelong learner of the Bible. You need to be a lifelong learner of people. You just need to be very, very observant and eager to learn more. And the Lord will feed that. And it will lead to experiences. I wanted to do that, and I ended up in the military and living in places like Izmir, Turkey. Naples, Italy. Lived in Alaska for 6 years. Loved it. Amazing place. So one of the things that made it easy on our family, we had 2 boys. The younger one got 23 years in the State Department as a counterterrorism officer. So he loved it. So instead of whining about having to say bye to your friends because now we're moving again, we talked a lot about what we were going to do when we got there. And they couldn't wait to get there. So, and that's leading. So they were very much in learning mode, their whole life really. So you never know what you're going to bump into, and what a shame to bump into amazing things, but that switch isn't turned on and you missed all of it.
I love what you said about, commit yourself to becoming a lifelong learner.
That's the key. Well, you can apply that to any scenario.
Yeah. And that's especially applicable to Narrowgate graduates specifically, because when they come here, they learn a lot, and it's handed to them on a platter, handed to us. As Narrowgate students, you wake up, you come down, you make breakfast, do some quiet time, and then you sit for the rest of the morning in a study or a lesson, and then you go out and work, and then have, lunch, and then, dinner, and at the end of the day, you're doing another, immersive study. And so it's like learning is just a part of what's provided for you at Narrowgate. And then when you graduate, you go back out into the real world, and all of a sudden that's not how it works anymore.
Yeah, people don't care about you.
That's right. Nobody's just teaching you just stuff, and you just wake up and just sit there and learn. And so it's. I think that's such a great piece of encouragement for graduates specifically. It's like there is still more to learn, but now you have to decide that you want to continue to learn and go out there and do it and learn it.
Yeah, another phrase that I use quite a bit is I want to be people's headlights, because what you just said is great, and this is not a critique, but then they go off and now they're on their own. and people aren't as nice as they are here. And, people take advantage of them and stuff because they can't see ahead. What's ahead of them, the kind of people they're going to be working with next year, they can't see it coming until it runs over them. And then they learn from the wounds.
Yeah.
And as much as possible, we need to be their headlights to where we can say, it's just like I do with the leadership guys. I'm pointing them to scenarios that they're going to experience as leaders. That's headlights.
Wow.
That's what I want to be doing.
Gosh.
And that's what y'all are doing.
Dr. Bradley, thank you for being here, not just for the time you spent here in this podcast, but just the time that you give to navigate to the students, for coming out here and being a part of what's going on here in the guys' lives. Thank you for the impact you've had on my life, just the life that you've lived and the heart to pass on what you've learned to other people. I appreciate you.
It's a mission of love that God has put in my heart.
Yeah.
It's all Him.
Yeah. Well, thank you again.
Thanks for having me out.
Thank you.
Yeah.